Hello and welcome back to the My Journey podcast here on my YouTube channel. If you're listening through the usual podcast streams, thank you very much for tuning in. This is the place where I discuss all things business and document my freelance journey to date. Today is another YouTube special, if you haven't already guessed. Obviously, you get a great experience through the podcast, but if you want to get the full experience, head over to my YouTube channel and watch the full video there. As I did last time, this is going to be a short run through of a key moment or a key topic relating to my journey. And today it's all about how I started. The last one was all about how I got my first clients. And somebody mentioned to me, it's great knowing how you got your first clients, but how and why did you start up as a freelancer? So this is what this is going to be about today. So if we go probably quite a long story, we're going to go back quite a way on this one. And it begins with me having this urge, this drive, these tendencies to be entrepreneurial, loved business, kind of discovered business as a subject approaching GCSEs. And before that, I'd always liked the idea of making money, saving, having more money, building things, selling things, that kind of thing. And one of the key moments of me determining that what I wanted to do in the future was to be a businessman or an entrepreneur or whatever you want to call it was the story that's been retold to me since that I'd completely forgotten about. And I think I've probably mentioned it in passing on the pod before. And that was, I had a mentor at sixth form. It was a part of the sixth form college I went to. You could have a mentor. So I opted to have a mentor, industry mentor. And he sat me down and he says, when I walked into the room, because I've spoken to him since, and he said, what do you want to be? And he said he loved having a wide variation of different people. So, you know, doctors, engineers, all this kind of different thing. And I just sat there and went, I want to be an entrepreneur. And his next question was, what in? And my response was, I don't know. And I think that showed I knew I wanted to do it, but I don't think I'd found what I was passionate about, what I loved or what my calling was. But I knew I wanted to be involved in business in some way. So yeah, I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I remember as well, at a similar time, I believe it was in sixth form, it might have been a little bit before that actually, but I was studying business studies and we were told that a previous year had been able to do a business challenge where I think it was something like they started with £5 each and they had to go off and build a business. And one of the lads in that year had been very successful at building a business, and we all knew who he was because he turned up to sixth form in his private reg new car and things like that. So he'd done very well. But we didn't get that opportunity. And I used to be really frustrated that I hadn't been allowed to do that. And I knew at that point that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to buy and sell things or just sell things or whatever it was and make money. I just loved that. And I'd tried to run a few businesses while I was at school. Selling things to all the students, like your snacks and stuff like that. Did that, it was quite a few. And if you listen to podcasts regularly, Tom, who's my co-host, he was leading the way in that, shall we say. Anyone who went to our school will know that Tom was the go-to man for all the snacks on a break time. And another one that I started that not many people know about was actually on the side, and it was the time of like the yellow pages was a thing. But I wasn't really online, and I had this idea of making local online directory websites. I can't remember the exact name of what it was, but we live in an area that's known as Ellerton cum Brough, and my idea was to make a directory of businesses that serve that area. So your plumbers, your electricians, dog walkers, all these different kinds of people. And I remember going around businesses and offering these packages to them, and I actually got a bit of interest, but I didn't know enough about the way that business works and stuff like that, and setting up a website and things like that. And it just one of these that fizzled out and never really became anything. And you know, looking at yell.com nowadays, I wish I'd started it. But yeah, it was one of these where I tried it, didn't really work, but it was always there. I was always trying things like that. So I've always wanted to run a business. And as I say, when I spoke to my mentor, I never really knew what that was going to be. The next kind of like step in me becoming a freelancer, doing what I'm doing today, was when I went to university. And I've mentioned this recently on the pod, that it was only when I went to university that I realised that marketing was the bit of business studies, the subject that I really enjoyed. It had been called marketing, but it was only ever the 4Ps, and if you've done marketing, you'll know about the 4Ps. That's all we ever really did in terms of marketing. It wasn't that exciting. It was only when I got into it at university that I realised what marketing actually was, and thought, this is what I want to do. And the reason I came across it was did a common first year, which allowed me to do management, marketing, accounting, and HR, I believe. And did accounting and HR, I knew they worked for me, quite like the management bit, but really loved marketing and knew that's where I wanted to be going forward. So that was like kind of the next step in, when you look back over things. I didn't know at the time, but that was the next step in me becoming a freelancer. And actually, while I was at university, I think definitely on one occasion, maybe on two, I'm not quite sure, but myself and Tom, who I was to say is the co-host of the podcast normally, we tried to set up a social media marketing business. Now, I was definitely into marketing and all that stuff, and I think I needed somebody to do it alongside me, so I approached Tom with this idea, and he was really up for it. First time, I think we did do it twice. I think the first time it was just one of these that we never really got around to pushing through, but the second time we hit a stumbling block and it never really went anywhere. And by the time it was at a point where we could pick it back up again, I was thinking about my next steps in terms of my university career and going on to a placement. And I said, by the time we've actually got this set up and running, I'm going to be joining a placement in a couple of months. And I've got, when you do a placement, you have your placement. So I was working 9 to 5 and you have uni work on the side of that. So I said, I just won't have time to do this. So we never went ahead with that. And I was only talking to this with Tom. He only mentioned it the other day about how far and how interesting it is to look back and see that moment where we tried to do this thing, and like where I am now, it's almost the same thing but in a completely different way. So yeah, before I move on to the next step, I would just like to say, if you're listening or you're watching this, please do subscribe to the My Journey podcast, or if you're on YouTube, just the channel in general. Putting out loads of content at the moment, and it would really mean a lot. So yeah, if you can subscribe, that would be absolutely fantastic. So the next step on the journey was jobs. Now, I had a job at Hull 2017, which I'm sure everyone who's listened to the podcast will be well aware of. I had an absolutely fantastic time, and people even said to me at the time, this is one of the best jobs you'll ever have. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens next for you, in terms of nothing will compare to this. And I've not had a real job since. And I think it's because it was so good there, I didn't really want to do anything else. But when I did, so I worked there for a year, almost 2 years in the end, because I did part-time alongside my degree for a year as well. I finished my degree, and then by the time I finished my degree, the company was coming to a close and the legacy company was taking over. And I've spoken about that before on the podcast, and in my last solo episode, how I got my first client. So if you want to hear about that, go back to episode 30, how I got my first client, and you'll hear all about what happened there. But when I finished my degree, I had the decision to make. I had to decide whether or not I was going to go down the route of freelancing, or if I was going to go down the route of getting a job. And there's kind of two parts to this decision. And the first part is whether or not I wanted to get a job. And how that came about was I applied for jobs, but I just didn't have that fire in my belly that I had when I was looking at the whole 2017 job. And I was looking at descriptions and speaking to potential employers, going for interviews, asking them questions. And I felt, and I think I've said this on the pod before, that the term graduate actually held me back. A lot of the people I was speaking to were saying, yeah, you can come in and do this role, I wanted to do something that was different, further along the line over here. And they were saying you can get there, but it'll be in 2 years when you've proven yourself. And I was thinking, well, I have done that. I've spent 2 years working on one of the biggest arts and cultural festivals, doing some of the marketing for that for the last 2 years, working on huge projects, huge budgets. You know, I think I've proven that I can do that. And the next step is for me to do it full time. But the employers didn't see it that way. The jobs they were offering weren't exciting me. So I kind of had to make a decision, was that what I wanted to do? And then on the other side, I've got this decision about whether I want to go and be an entrepreneur. I don't really like that phrase, but if I want to go and be an entrepreneur or a freelancer. And on that side of things, I was sitting down having discussions with the Enterprise Centre at the university and speaking to them about how I would go about this. And I've been in contact with them quite a bit through when me and Tom were looking to set up and a couple of other things. And they just basically said to me, if you've made the decision to do it, you need to do it. And the step they gave me was to go and sign, like, go to the government and put down that I am self-employed. And they said, don't come back to us until you've done it, because we can talk and talk and talk and talk, but until you've done that, there's no point going any further. So that week I went and applied to be self-employed and got all the documents through and set myself up on the government gateway and all like that as self-employed, which was a huge step, because I think that was the moment I did actually decide to go freelance rather than down the traditional careers route. And a lot around that time as well was about, there's a lot goes into it. Once I'd made that decision, there's a lot more to do. Some big decisions about how I set up and things like that. And I'm going to save all of that for a future episode, because I think there's a lot of discussion about people who are starting out as freelancers, that I'm not saying there's a right or wrong way to do it, but I would like to deep dive into my experiences of how I decided to do that and what I decided to do, because there were some tricky decisions as part of that, even after I decided to go freelance, about how I did that, and that still impacts what I'm doing today as a freelancer. So I will go into all of that, hopefully in another episode down the line, if that's what you guys want. So if you do, drop me a line, drop a comment, whatever. Just let me know if that's something of interest to you. But yeah, so when I was sat there with them decisions, the other thing you've got to think about is, like, do I want to be a freelancer? Do you want to go into the world of work? There's pros and cons to both, and the pros to being a freelancer were that that's what I'd always wanted to do without realising it. It gave me freedom. It excited me. And I thought there was a gap in the market, and this is something I'm working on at the moment, because I don't think I've exploited it enough in terms of the personal branding side of social media. On the other side, you've got going and getting a job, and the positives of that were security, so steady income, the things that people don't realise about, like, wider than your employment, so getting mortgages and stuff like that become a lot easier if you go down that route. And there was other things, but ultimately it came down to which was I preferred to do. And luckily, when I started freelancing, I was living at home, and the decision, the risk of going as a freelancer was much lower because of that, because I had the backing of my parents, and although they've never financially put any money into what I do, all I earn is what I earn, and I've done it all myself, there was that safety blanket of, if things go wrong, I've not got a landlord who's knocking at my door, or I've not got the bank knocking at my door trying to take my house off me. And I always thought, if I didn't do it now when I've got this cut off, when would I do it? Because once you go into a job and you start earning, when do you say I'm going to give up this money? Or when I'm going to start working on the side? Or when you've got a partner and a house and all this, when do you actually get that moment to say, I'm going to step away from this career and go over here? So when I started, I gave myself a year. Well, I had 6 months to start making some kind of progress, and a year to have the green shoots of something. So I didn't have to have a fully fledged business that was paying me millions within a year, but I had to have something that I could look at and go, either we're there, it's earning a decent income, or we can see how this is going and when it will earn me a decent income. And they were the parameters I had, and I'd set myself, and now I am here 2.25 years later. So clearly something went right along the way. But that is a very brief, nearly 15-minute overview of how I got into freelancing. I hope that inspires some of you. If you've got any questions, if you're someone who's thinking about doing it, or someone who is partway through that process, do drop me a line. I'm totally open to talking to people. If you're in the area of Hull, you know, when it's easier, we can catch up and what have you, and have a chat about it. But yeah, if you're going down that same journey or thinking about it, please do reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to speak to you all that's left for me to say is subscribe, share this with a friend, like, whatever you can do, whichever platform you listen on, whether it's the audio or the video. Just make sure to get involved and comment, share, all that kind of stuff, because it gives me some great feedback and it means I can reach more people with this stuff. So yeah, until next time, thank you for listening.